Greetings. Well, first of all, do not dare blame me. I share my story not because I want to hear how disgusting I am, even though I'm positive that by the end of my story, many of you will think that way. But you have never walked in my shoes, and you can't judge me without any doubt. Okay, Nikki. Yes, my name is Nikki. Calm down. I just want you to know that even though I screwed things up, my intentions were good. 3 times, my story and my fate took an unexpected turn, so I'll divide this story up into 3 chapters. Chapter 1, or How My Grandmother Got Married. My grandfather died more than 20 years ago when I was still a baby, and I don't remember him at all. So my grandmother, by the way, her name is Ella, was always single, occasionally meeting self-sufficient widowers. I have a reason to name them self-sufficient, because Ella herself is the true model of a successful, mature woman. My grandmother founded her own business, a small but quite profitable French restaurant in Manhattan, and feels totally at ease there among all these business sharks and Wall Street wolves. My grandmother is a strong woman. However, this has its drawbacks. Her severe temper is one of them. She's hard to talk to, and even harder to please, which causes many problems. For example, Grandmother Ella had quite high expectations for her daughter, my mother, but her daughter disappointed her in every possible way, finalising it by marrying a man who Ella could completely not stand. As a result, my mother and my grandmother have not talked to each other and have not seen each other for years. And the worst thing is that it completely suits both of them. As for my father, well, I totally understand why Ella doesn't like him. He's an extremely passive, pathetic person, and he showed even less interest in my life than my mother did. With me, my grandmother is not as strict, at least for now, so our relationship is pretty normal, though I wouldn't call it close, as it's Ella who pays for my college. I'm 22 years old, I'm in my last year of studies, and I'm only a step away from my diploma, so my grandmother's financial support is really important. My parents can't afford to pay for me. I understand that I'm completely dependent on Ella, and it has brought me many sleepless nights and remorse. Soon, you'll understand why. Well, now we reach the point where my story makes the first unexpected turn. By the time I received the unexpected wedding invitation, I hadn't seen my grandmother for about 6 months and had no idea what was happening in her life, but I was very happy for her. So I went to her wedding with great enthusiasm to congratulate her, even though she did not bother to invite my parents, which was, of course, awkward. The ceremony was closed, and the following party was only for a very small circle of people, but everything was first class. My grandmother wore an absolutely stunning dress, which suited her to a T. The only thing I was really curious about was that I didn't see the groom. A handsome best man stood alone for a very long time, until Ella came right to him. And it turned out that he was not the best man, but the groom. Well, the problem was that he looked about 30 years old. My grandmother Ella is 60. Not that I was conservative, but damn it! Paul. His name was Paul. He was from Montreal. He looked exactly like Ella's son. A little later, I found out that he was 35 years old, but this did not make a big difference. So after I realised who the groom was, I watched the remaining ceremony in complete shock. Later, however, I pulled myself together, and when I had the opportunity to speak to my grandmother in private, I gave her full support. Ella really appreciated it. I haven't seen her so happy and relaxed for a long time. She took my hands, kissed my cheek, and said that she missed her granddaughter and that she wanted me to come to her restaurant more often. At the same time, I could get to know Paul better. He worked there as a chef. And now, chapter 2 of my story begins. It is about... No, I don't want to give you any spoilers. I did not wait long to respond to my grandmother's invitation to visit her restaurant, especially since there was a reason. My grandmother was having a private party for her wealthy friends and wrote me a message that she would be glad to see me there. I was a little nervous, but of course I agreed. Ella's high life always attracted me. Alas, I didn't meet any celebrities at my grandmother's restaurant. No one introduced me to any millionaires either. so I just wandered about sheepishly and lonely until Ella found a moment to apologise, saying that she needed to entertain her guests, and sent Paul to keep me company. On that day, he was not working in the kitchen. I was upset and offended by Ella, but it was typical of her. Paul quickly realised where exactly his wife had gone wrong and cheered me up within a few moments. I must admit that it is easy for me to make contact with good-looking people if I like what I see, and it's easy to look at the person I talk to. I feel relaxed and the conversation runs smoothly. I especially liked Paul's brown eyes and his neat dark beard. He immediately told me that I shouldn't be offended that my grandmother or that these people around us ignored me. It is typical for a private party, and the best I could do was just to relax and take it easy. He also added that I would not miss anything, since all Ella's friends were terribly boring, and he knew. I laughed at his joke and thought that I wouldn't mind spending the rest of the evening with him. Paul went to the table and got something for me to eat. A wonderful puff pastry pie stuffed with snail meat and blue cheese sauce. Oh, Paul did understand something about French cuisine, even if he had only visited France during his internship. I learned all of these details from his life that evening. He fueled my interest by filling my glass with French sparkling wine. I know nothing about wines, but it was very tasty. That evening I relaxed. Perhaps excessively. Okay, I just have to say that. And to admit that I was very frivolous. So Grandmother Ella was so busy that she forgot about me and about her own husband. And in the meantime, we deceived her that night. Chapter 3 is about how it all ends. On the next day, after Paul and I had meticulously inspected the restaurant pantry, he sent me a few very tender text messages and suggested that we meet at some neutral place. I couldn't refuse his offer. I also wanted to make a sequel to this story. I fell in love with Paul. That's why I'm asking you to not judge me, because feelings are not something that we can control, are they? I did not have a boyfriend, and Paul was an experienced man who knew how to charm girls. That's why it did not even occur to me that my romance with Paul, and I somehow decided right away for myself that it was a romance, had to be stopped. All this looked like some kind of a mean game. Paul was constantly looking for an opportunity to meet me behind Ella's back. I'd look for a suitable apartment or a hotel room, every time in a different part of town, so that nobody could spot us. This game even seemed exciting to me. I guess I looked at the world through rose-coloured glasses. Of course I understood what I was doing and realised that I was not only deceiving my grandma Ella, dating her handsome husband behind her back, but also exposing myself to a terrible risk. It was scary for me to even imagine Ella's reaction if she found out about me and Paul. You do remember that she just erased her own daughter from her life, right? But her daughter did not do anything terrible, and she was certainly not going to steal Ella's young husband. But I, on the contrary, really thought about it. It seemed to me that Paul deserved a better partner than Ella. After all, she was, well, old. I could give Paul everything that she did, except for maybe money. But then I didn't think about money at all. For the first time in my life, I completely forgot that my grandmother paid my bills and that without her, I wouldn't be able to get my university degree. I wanted to take Paul away from Ella. Actually, I wanted to marry him, even though it might sound strange. But wasn't his marriage to a woman who was 25 years older than him strange enough? Paul and I were secretly meeting at hotels for about 4 months when I finally decided to talk to him about our future. While we were in the midst of one of these shadowy encounters, when Paul and I had breakfast at the hotel lobby and he fiercely criticised the local food, I pulled myself together and spoke out. I want to tell Ella about us. Poor Paul almost choked on a bun. He looked at me with eyes full of shock and only asked, why? I suspected that something was going wrong, but still tried to explain that I'd gotten tired of deceiving my grandmother and that I wanted a normal, real, decent relationship. And then my fate made a twist, which I want to talk about. Paul looked into my eyes with sympathy. tenderly took my hand and said that it was out of the question, that he enjoyed the time he had spent with me very much, but he would never allow Ella to know. His work in her restaurant was very important to him, and if my grandmother found out about us, it would mean the end of his career. This was, of course, the end of my, God forgive me, romance with Paul. I won't even say how painful it was. I will only say that I wanted to take revenge on him and tell Ella everything. And then I realised that I was in a catch-22. Even if I confessed and repented, my grandmother would never, ever forgive me and wouldn't pay my tuition fees anymore. Well, thanks for listening to my story. I will not draw any conclusions from my story just yet. So please like it if you are not indifferent and subscribe to the channel